All right. So, hi, for those who are joining us. My name is Tom Campbell with College Essay Guy, and you are here with myself and Jay for Beyond the Classroom, building a standout extracurricular path that leaves you energized, not drained. Talk about a mouthful. All right. So, a few housekeeping items before we get going. This session is being recorded before you ask. That's your answer. And it will be emailed out to you as a follow-up because you registered for this session. You're in our system. You're going to get the email follow-up, and you're also going to get the slide deck that we're moving through as well. So you'll have the slides to go forward with, as well as any of the resources that we have linked in the slides too for your leisure. If you need AI-generated captions, they should be available at your Zoom control panel, and that's typically at the bottom of your screen. It also is able to typically auto-detect different languages if you need that instead. So can't say it's going to be a perfect translation, but if it's something that you need, go ahead and use it. And questions, we very much welcome questions. I'm the one screen sharing and moving through the slides, so Jay is going to be keeping an eye out on the Q&A box with some of your questions as we present the material. So please don't be shy. We'd love for this session to be as helpful to you as possible. And we'll see how many questions we can hit towards the end of the session. Usually we go a little over the hour with the Q&A section. So if you want to stick around for that, just know that that's something that you'll see on the horizon. Also wanted to do a quick plug for, I'm not sure if you know this, but College Essay Guy actually has a upcoming webinars and live events webpage where we have all of our events listed for the next, usually we update it for the next whole month. And we're doing things multiple times a week. Even today, we're having 2 other different webinars that are happening in addition to this one. So definitely recommend bookmarking that page, or even better, there's actually a calendar extension that you can add to your Google Calendar or your Apple Calendar that will populate the sessions automatically for you. So you don't even have to do really any labor, and you can just register for the sessions that you want. So huge shout out for that page. It's a great way to kind of know what's on the horizon. All right, this is what we're going to be diving into today. Lots of different themes. They should be pretty consistent with what you saw on the email invitation. But we're going to start things off with Jay's going to talk a little bit about how your roles, identities, and values should ideally influence the extracurricular path that you choose, right? Because there's a lot of data that suggests that engagement in things that you actually care about is going to result in you being more impactful, more plugged in, more charged with what you're doing outside the classroom. I'll go through a little bit of an analysis of 5 particular qualities that we have found at College Essay Guy to be things that the majority of colleges and universities have voiced through their mission statements, values statements that they're looking for in students. So it's also a good idea to have extracurriculars align with things that you're into, but also things that colleges are looking for in their incoming classes. So we'll kind of cover that side of the coin. We'll talk a little bit more about what selective colleges in particular are looking for with the when it comes to a student's extracurricular path. Sometimes people wonder, why are you spending a lot of time talking about selective or top colleges? But we polled our audience, and that is what most people come to College Essay Guy for support around. I think that's because most of the colleges that have essays attached to their admissions process are schools that are more selective and choosy with candidates. So we are your messengers. We are not here saying that these colleges are better than others. In fact, we're all about balanced college lists, and we think that there's lots of great options that are out there. We are just providing you, our audience, with what you have voiced over the years is most top of mind for you. Then we're going to go move into the things that you see on the right side of the screen, which is a little more of like examples and a little bit of a plug for more original and self-directed approaches to extracurriculars that we have found from our experience as college counselors to be most impactful for students. So Jay's going to kick things off with roles, identities, values, and how those align with your extracurriculars.
Thanks, Tom. So I'm going to first start off by talking about what counts as an extracurricular activity. So an extracurricular activity could be anything outside of the regular classwork that student does in their school. So beyond their schools, anything that they do outside would be count as an extracurricular activity. So for example, if a student took an academic enrichment course or a summer program, that would count as an extracurricular activity. Any activity that the student does with consistent engagement would count. So things like the student's involvement in sports or the clubs that they participate in school, music, volunteering, and so forth. Those would all be considered an extracurricular activity. What doesn't count as an extracurricular activity would be just things that student does on their daily normal lives, things like eating, but what does count would be things like what if they have something like a family responsibility where they have to take care of younger sibling, or maybe one of their relatives is sick, so they have to take time out of their schedule to take care of this sick relative. So family responsibilities would count. Essentially, I guess an easy way to think about it is anything beyond their like school classes with meaningful value counts as an activity. So anything like a hobby or any of their interests that they participate in outside of their classroom is considered an extracurricular activity. So the Common Application actually does a really good job in categorizing different types of extracurricular activities. So on the Common Application, the activities page, for each of the different activities, students can categorize it in one of these categories. So for example, they have things like academic, athletics, cultural, um, foreign language, internships, music, robotics, social justice, work. And then for students that have an activity that doesn't really fit into any of these categories, they can actually list it under other clubs or other activities. So it's really broad. Whatever the student participates in can be included in the Common Application, which will add value for the college application. So when we're deciding what type of extracurriculars are best for, the student, we really want to think about activities that align with your values and your identity. So that could be broken down into personal values, multiple identities, and future aspirations. So under personal values, these are just simply the activities that you care about and activities that are interesting to you. So whether that's creativity or volunteering or leadership or intellectual curiosity, different students have different interests. Some are naturally going to gravitate towards arts and music. Some are going to gravitate more towards sports. And there's no right or wrong, type of activities. It's just really the one that the person values the most. Next are there are certain identities that students will identify with, things that are maybe potentially related to a gender identity or a cultural background identity, and these are important to have in terms of their activities as well. And then finally, the last type would be future aspirations, which are really for students who want to get a head start or start thinking about their future majors or their future career and aligning their activities to explore those potential majors and career options. So an example would be a student who's interested in doing pre-med might want to start volunteering at a hospital or maybe shadow a doctor to explore that interest further and to think about what they want to do in the future.
Yeah. And real quick, I just want to voice, with this slide in particular, we're obviously living in a time right now where there's a lot of conversation nationally about things related to diversity, equity, inclusion, identity. And, regardless of kind of what policies are kind of being put out there, from legislative levels and how they impact the admissions process on paper, and kind of that side of this process. In terms of students feeling more alive and more kind of connected to the work that they're doing, these kind of three areas do tend to align more with students feeling plugged in to what they're doing outside of the classroom. So when you feel a sense of camaraderie and connection to a group of people, for example, that share similar identities as you, that does tend to correlate with activities that have more meaning to the student. And then same thing with personal values or personal roles and identities that a student occupies, right? When you're, involved in an activity that has students of multiple strengths, weaknesses, roles, identities, values, you tend to produce the best work. And that's the case for any industry or any endeavor. When you have people of different minds, different skill sets, different areas of expertise, different perspectives, you produce a result in the end. Any company and any kind of project will say the same thing. You understand more of all the spectrum of different walks of life when those voices are in the room and being folded into your activities. So just a plug for that, and just wanted to name something that may be a little confusing right now in this current landscape.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then at CG, for us to help ourselves understand our own roles and identity, we've developed an exercise as the one you're seeing right now, If you want to see the Google Doc, once you get the slides, you can click on the link, which will bring you to the Google Doc. But through this exercise, we're asking students to pick out or bold 10 of the roles that they identify with. And after they pick their 10, we ask them to choose a few of them, so 3 or 4, and write 2 to 3 ways where they can manifest that identity or role in their daily lives. So what we've also done after that is we created a blog post with all the identities and roles and given a few examples under each one of them for how the student can explore each of these different roles and identity. So for students who maybe are stuck, but they know they want to be an activist, an ambassador, an experimenter, they can go to our blog and go under the activist category and see some of the example activities or projects that are listed under there to just give students an idea of what they could potentially be doing. By no means are these the only activities and projects that students have done. These are just some samples to give students just somewhere to get started or see what they could do if they're getting a little bit lost. All right.
Oftentimes having that, just like with students who look at our website for essay examples, of like, how to write the essays for NYU or for the Common App or the UCs, University of California schools. We've really been trying to do a good job of giving more examples and inspiration to students who sometimes really benefit from just seeing what other people have done and what can be possible when you kind of look at things that you're really into or a part of how you live your daily life. And what are some ways that I can actually do that and have it count as an extracurricular? And that's just an interesting question to really reflect on and think about. Okay. So switching gears a little bit more from what students are into and kind of what motivates them, now we're going to switch gears to kind of what colleges are motivated to find and seek out in applicants. So if you've been to a few of the past, I'd say in the past 6 months or so at College Essay Guy, we've been presenting more frequently on this concept that we're calling admission nutrients. And essentially what these are we've tried to distill about five common themes or attributes that most colleges have said in their mission statements and their value statements, their strategic plans, that they're looking for more in students. So as a former admission reader, right, at Pomona College, we had our own valued qualities that were a part of our admission process that when I was reviewing an application, I was supposed to look for probing inquiry and creative learning. I was supposed to look for intellectual curiosity. I was supposed to look for all these kind of different things that are tied to Pomona's mission statement. So we wanted to kind of give families something that could be a little more, students and families, a little more of like a guiding light, because you can't really tailor the way you spend your high school experience to meet what every college wants. That's not fair to you as a student because you should be doing the things like Jay said that are most meaningful to you. But ideally, any of the extracurricular categories or buckets or experiences that Jay showed in the previous slides can allow you to cultivate these nutrients. These nutrients are not just things that colleges value. If you look at this little like chart here, we particularly also wanted to have them be aligned, not just with these are things that colleges want you to do and want to see in students. They're also things that employers want to see more in students as well, in graduates of college in terms of the workforce. And they also align pretty closely with this theory called PERMA, which is basically qualities for a well-meaning life by a social scientist called Martin Seligman. So these nutrients, these things that you see here on the screen are a pretty great intersection of those three things: qualities for a meaningful life, things that employers want, and things that colleges value. So this is a resource that we really recommend students and families and counselors really kind of circulate and think about. And as you are a student moving through your extracurricular experiences throughout high school, ask yourself, how can I maybe align my extracurriculars more with some of these nutrients that are good for me and also are things that colleges are voicing frequently across the board that they really want to see in students? I like this slide in particular because what it does is under each of these five, key admission nutrients, it also is giving you some of the questions that an admission officer, as they're reading through an application, these are things that they would be asking themselves as they're kind of moving through an application and wondering, where can I find evidence across recommendation letters, a student's resume and activities list, their essays, their personal statement, their why I want to major in classics essay. Where can I find evidence for all of these 5 things? And again, I'm not saying that every college is using these as qualities that are aligned with their admission rubric and their reading process. However, according to our analysis, these are the most thematic across hundreds of different colleges and universities that maybe use different specific words or terms that encapsulate these same ideas here, right? In terms of a little more explicitly why these admission nutrients, why and how these admission nutrients are valuable when it comes to extracurricular planning, colleges really value students who are pursuing extracurricular activities that align with their academic and their future goals. So that would be intellectual curiosity, right? Any activities of yours that can kind of show that you are going the extra mile beyond what you're learning in class related to the academic subject that you want to study and potentially the future career path that you're looking to go into. More and more colleges increasingly in the past 5-10 years are looking for this concept called fit to major when they're making admissions decisions. It varies from college to college, but in general, there is a little bit more of an expectation among people in admissions of having that alignment be present somewhere in the student's application. Another big theme that sometimes is misunderstood in the world of extracurricular planning is service to others. A lot of times families think that what an admissions officer is doing is just looking at an application and being like, where can I find the service hours listed on the transcript or wherever, a school might put it, a high school might put it. That's not really how an admission officer is gathering this quality. They're looking for evidence, again, from anecdotes, from recommendation letters, from your own essays, from the way that you spent your time on your activities list to see that you're aligning your time outside of the classroom with causes, populations, things that are going to benefit someone other than yourself. So really kind of thinking about that component. And again, it doesn't have to be every single way that you spend your time, but generally, if the way that you're spending your time outside the classroom is going to benefit someone else, another group, a cause, a social issue, it's probably going to be very well received on the other end. Leadership or initiative. Jay's going to talk about this in a lot more depth, but this is something that is really important, I'd say, for a lot of different colleges in terms of seeing students who have gone beyond the standard like menu or array that your high school might provide. So high schools are great. They have lots of options for students to engage in lots of different ways. But ideally, as a student, you're thinking about how can I go the extra mile beyond just being a member in some of these clubs and actually leading. It doesn't mean you necessarily have to be president of every single club under the sun or every sports team. But ideally, what you're doing is thinking about ways that you can leave a legacy and an impact with your actions and propose new ideas, new collaborations, which is a great segue to collaboration. This is one, these two that you see at the bottom here are actually the ones that I would argue are the least spoken about in essays or kind of like put more front and center in a student's application, but they're definitely things that colleges are really mindful of seeing across students' activities. So when it comes to collaboration, kind of as I said before in my little interjection with the values, roles, and identities section, colleges want to see that you as a student are able to thrive and participate and fold in different perspectives, that you see the value in people seeing a problem or an idea a different way than you. Industries work better when you have that perspective. Every project is more effective in terms of reaching different populations, resonating with different groups of people when you have different skill sets and values in the room. So, and also amplifying efforts that you're doing in your community, in your school, and expanding the reach of them. That's a big theme of what colleges are looking for too in students and their activities. You have to collaborate with other people to make that happen, whether that's, oh, I made this really cool curriculum for my school to help teach, or my middle school to help teach students how to code. How can I get this in more schools in my area? How can I get more people, who are in similar roles at different high schools to also be adopting this curriculum? Can I reach out to school principals at other places? Can I reach out to districts? That's also going to be helping you as a student build skills like cold emailing, pitching your ideas to an unfamiliar audience. These are all things that are valuable no matter what industry or profession or major that you want to study in. So again, collaborating and knowing who can be in your corner, who can be supporting you, who you can be partnering with is a great skill to start adopting as a high school student. And then just consistent engagement. This one kind of goes without saying. Colleges like to see students who've engaged with things over multiple years, not just one particular year. So that's just something to think about as you are, planning your activities. It's very normal for students to have left behind some things early on in high school that weren't filling their cup, that weren't aligning with their values and interests and identities. That's super typical. So, the Common App has 10 activity spaces. It's very rare for students to be kind of consistently engaged with 10 things all throughout high school. So again, and Jay's going to talk a little bit more about this, thinking of the ways to kind of like find the 3 to 4 things that you really want to spend your time doing and really committing to that. This is just a note that we did a little bit of an analysis of previous applicants who worked one-on-one with College Essay Guy. We work with students on both essay and application support, as well as all aspects of the college planning process. And so we looked at some of our former students and we looked through their applications to see, is there evidence of these admission nutrients in these files? And for the vast majority, yes. We saw lots of evidence across different application components of these qualities. The two that you can see that, again, I kind of mentioned these a little bit and drilled down on these in terms of the previous slide, that I would say are less explored or cultivated or seen as kind of less of a priority. And they're ones that I want to have you think about doing because fewer students in the admission landscape or pool are thinking, I'd say, especially about collaboration and how to fold that into their activities. So just some key takeaways here on this slide. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because I want to make sure to keep things moving. But the nutrients are a helpful guiding light of how to spend your time. It doesn't mean that these are the only things that colleges value. Individual college mission statements are a really good way to get a sense for what schools value, things like creativity or resilience or critical thinking, and if you're a student putting together an application or wondering how to spend the next few months applying, putting together your best foot forward to apply, knowing what the colleges that are on your list are looking for and qualities that they want to see is a great way to kind of think about what experiences can I write about in my application and highlight to show that alignment and that mutuality. And then this last one here, right? How can I fold maybe collaboration a little bit more into my activities when I know that not quite as many students are maybe talking about this as explicitly, and it's something that colleges are really valuing and just not seeing as much in the narrative. I think people are worried of like giving too much credit to someone else, but both things can be true. You can still be a leader and be leading initiatives and leading on the idea of it takes a village and making sure that other people are helping the things that you're doing have a higher reach and have a higher impact. Okay, so real quickly, a little bit of the role of extracurriculars in the broader college application landscape and process. So this is data that we frequently report out. It's from the National Association for College Admission Counseling, also known as NACAC. And every year as they release a poll, they poll, all different colleges and universities of all shapes and sizes and types and levels of selectivity. And they ask them, what are the most important components of your admission process? And as you can see from this chart here, the most considerably important components for most colleges and universities are your grades and the courses that you've chosen within your high school context. So we are spending time talking about extracurriculars, but I just want to voice that sometimes people think like, oh, like I had some stumbles throughout high school, but like I'm really well involved outside of school. So that's going to show them. You still need to have, especially if you're aiming for more selective schools, you still need to have the courses and the grades. That is like the foot in the door for a conversation to be admitted at some of these places. And then the admission officer is going to move on to some of these other components of your application, like your extracurricular activities. They do not supersede your courses and grades. What is interesting, though, is that the next category outside of your curriculum, your courses, your grades that you've chosen, that is important to colleges are these positive character attributes, aka things like the admission nutrients that I just presented on. So thinking about how your activities can align with admission nutrients and your personal values is, again, a really great kind of theme that we want to keep memeing out here in this particular session. I'm not going to go through this during this presentation just for the sake of time, but if you're curious to see how admission officers write up and talk about extracurricular activities in an actual application review process, there's a lot of students who have done videos like this that are basically like, they requested their admission file after they enrolled at the college or university that they applied to. So in this case, the student, Jerry, he requested his admission files from Stanford, where I think he may have graduated, but he ended up enrolling there and was able to request his admission file once he was enrolled. And it shows, in the notes that they sent him, he was able to see kind of things about like the ratings that he was given in different categories, like his high school rigor, school support, which are the ways that the teachers and the counselor are writing about him in his recommendations. There is a category for extracurricular, so that does receive its own standalone score, with the best being a 1 in the Stanford scale and a 6 being the worst. So you're seeing on this screenshot here of his kind of rubric that he's scoring pretty highly across the board in all these different core categories that Stanford is saying are important to their admission process. So there's a clip section of this video right here.
They do is
that, again, for the sake of time, I'm not going to have you watch through it. You're welcome to do it on your own time if you're curious, where he actually reads off what the Stanford admission officers wrote on his file about his extracurriculars. And you'll see that a big theme there is that they're looking for activities that show initiative and impact, and they actually give a bump in their score and their ratings to activities that have more impact. And for him, that had to do with his activities related to computational linguistics and machine learning. And they also write about how the guidance counselor confirms his high involvement in these areas in their recommendation letter, right? So also ensuring that like the things that you're doing and spending your time on are being communicated with your school-based counselor and your school counseling team, whether that's writing about it in your junior questionnaire when your counselor is like, hey, I need a brag sheet, I need a resume, I want to know more about you. It's a good idea to spend some time talking about the things that you've done as a high school student that are really important to you and that show that initiative and impact, and maybe some of these admission nutrients, because it's more likely that the person who's advocating for you through your letters of recommendation is going to mention them in the application too. All right, Jay.
All right, thanks, Tom. So next I'm going to be talking about, how to pick, your extracurricular activities and how many should students have. We say that it's going to be quality over quantity. And we have what's called the Core 4 philosophy. So what we mean by quality over quantity is on the applications, there's actually a limit to the number of activities that you can report. So on the Common application, you're able to report up to 10 activities. On the MIT application, they allow up to 4. And on the UC application, the University of California allows up to 20. So on these applications, students have to, if they have more than that, they have to pick their top ones. So we always tell students, have 4 of your activities that you've shown the most demonstration of meaningful commitment, and the ones where you've made the most impact. So these are maybe activities that student has done for multiple years, such as a sport. It could be a volunteer that they've participated with for multiple years, or a school club. So whatever it is, we want to make sure that students have at least about 4 of these strong activities that they can demonstrate to college that they made meaningful impact. These are oftentimes some of the activities that students will write about in their college essays, either in their personal statements or in the supplemental essays that they have to write as well. And oftentimes these are also the activities where students are able to show leadership opportunities, whether it's leading an initiative or taking charge in a project. These are some of the qualities that they'll be listing out in the activities and also the essays as well. And then Tom has mentioned, at the end of the day, the students still need to make sure that they have a academic balance where they're not overdoing so many activities that it's impacting their academics and they're not able to get the grades that will get them into the range of the schools that they want to apply for. So at the end of the day, extracurricular activities are super, super important. They make up a big chunk of many of the more competitive applications, but at the same time, finding that academic balance is also really important as well to make sure that the students can handle both the academics and the extracurriculars. So next, a lot of students are wondering how can they pick their activities. Sometimes they don't know what to major in, they don't know what they're doing in the future. So for the general majority of students, in 9th grade, they're going to be dabbling and exploring and figuring that out. Sometimes, very rarely, we'll have a student that's right from the get-go, from right in 9th grade, they already know, I want to do this or I want to do that. Great. In that case, they can jump right ahead and start exploring those specific areas. But for most students, they're not quite sure yet. So they'll talk to their friends. They'll probably ask their parents to see, what they should be doing. They might even look up to their teachers or parents for advice on what to do in the future. More specifically, a lot of the students that we work with tend to mirror what their parents do. So if a parent is an engineer, they will have interest towards engineering. If a parent is a doctor, they're going to show interest towards that. And then also what is current. I remember a few years ago when the first Iron Man movie came out, there's so many kids who want to learn engineering now. And then with the current trends of how much money tech and computer science is making, there's been a huge shift towards CS and tech-oriented jobs. So again, ninth grade is perfect for students to just explore and try out different things. If a student isn't sure about their majors, try a business club, try a engineering club, try a pre-med club, and through exploration and trial and error, they'll kind of figure out, okay, I like this or I don't like this. Yeah. Next in 10th grade, they'll kind of filter that down. So after exploring, after talking to people, after asking questions, after doing research on their own, they'll start to naturally narrow things down. Also by taking some classes in ninth grade, they're going to know what they like more or what they don't like. So for some students who aren't the strongest writers or not the biggest fan of history might naturally lean towards STEM as a potential area. Other students who aren't into STEM might focus on the humanities. In terms of their activities, after participating in them, they'll kind of know like which ones they enjoy or find interesting and which ones they don't. There are certain volunteer organizations that might draw their interest. There could be certain clubs, music or sports that students might find more interesting than not. And this is also a time period where sometimes interests can change. So you start off with a certain volunteer or sport or music, but then once a student hits 10th grade, they might not find that as enjoyable anymore, or their interests shift towards a different direction. It's okay to have changes in their activity as well. But in 10th grade, we really want to make sure that students are evaluating what they find interesting and important to them, and then taking some of those that they don't find interesting and redirecting their interest towards an area that they do find more valuable, more interesting, and more worthwhile their time. And then finally, in 11th grade, students have narrowed down their interests. They know what they like. They know, which activities are the most important to them. 11th grade is the year where they need to dig a deep dive and make sure that they can take their activities to the highest level that they can. So if there's any clubs that the students currently involved with, is there opportunities for you to take more responsibility, maybe go for a leadership position? Are there any projects that can come out of any of the current activities that they're part of? Like what I've been working with a current ASB class president, and we're talking about maybe different initiatives that he can start at his school, like a mental health week or a kindness week where students write just nice notes to each other. Things like that are ways to really elevate your activities to a higher level. And that's what students should be thinking about in 11th grade is now that students have dabbled and they've narrowed things down, they should take what they find important and interesting to a deeper level that they've already done. And then finally, in 12th grade, students should ensure continuity. So activities that they've started before to continue that to 12th grade. I've talked to admission officers who said they see sometimes they see students' activities where our students do something in 9th grade, then quit it, then start something new in 10th grade, then quit it, then start something new in 11th grade and then quit it. So that's not really showing continuity. Students really want to have activities that they've participated in maybe 2, 3, or even 4 years. Again, students should maintain that balance of their extracurriculars and the academics, making sure that they have time to do both. The students still need to continue focusing on activities that brings them joy. If it doesn't, oftentimes students won't be as active in that activity, or they might even think about quitting it. So again, as counselors and parents, we want to really motivate students to go continue activities that they're passionate and motivated to do. And then finally, students will plant seeds. So consider establishing new traditions or programs that will benefit future students. So creating a passion project that is longer lasting, or something that can, they can leave their legacy, starting a new club, creating a new project that can then they pass on to the next generation or the underclassmen to take over and to continue building. So
Yeah.
those are some common and unique activities that a lot of colleges are valuing.
Yeah.
And
I love
then
that point about kind of like, oh, go ahead, Jay.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna talk about this last slide of, sometimes students might have work or family responsibilities that doesn't really fit the traditional, what we consider activities. But those are still really important to highlight in your application, especially when sometimes they feel like, oh, because of work or because of these family responsibilities, which are really important, took up so much of my time, I didn't get time to participate in a school club or participate in an after-school activity. Students should still put that in their applications, really highlight the skills that they've developed from these work or family responsibilities, and then their direct impacts at working or whatever family responsibilities that they had. So again, not every student's going to fit the traditional mold, but it's important to highlight all of these qualities that they've developed through their activities, their work, and their family responsibilities.
Yeah. And I love like the theme of this particular slide because it's especially the advice at the bottom about focus on the skills you developed, impact of your contribution, and how you've grown through these experiences. That same messaging can be applied to work responsibilities as any of the other 26 categories on the Common App that Jay showed in the previous, in the first few slides, right? So again, a lot of times it's also about like digging deeper beyond the surface level description of how you spend your time and folding that into your activities list, into the way that you describe your activities in essay opportunities in a college application. So that's another thing just to be thinking about and iterating on, earlier than later is beyond the surface description. Obviously, volleyball, anyone who's seen volleyball knows what that entails. What did it actually look like to be a part of that team for 4 years? What was your role? How did you positively influence the team? What was the thing that you were known for? What was the legacy that you left, like that previous slide, right? So that's just, I think, lots of really good things to think about. Okay, so those are things, if you're hearing that and being like, oh, like, I didn't follow that path that, Tom and Jay just outlined, that's okay. Not every student does. It doesn't mean that like your dreams are crushed. But if you're a parent or counselor and are wondering, how can I kind of articulate extracurricular evolution to future students that I'm working with, or, other kids, my own, your own children who haven't gone through the college process yet, who may be younger, hopefully those kind of, that guidance of how to filter things down as time goes on and where to channel energy can be beneficial. We also find something to be another thing that's beneficial is telling people how maybe not to spend their time. And this is based on Jay and myself and other college counselors here at College Essay Guy, looking at students that we've worked with in the past and seeing some patterns and how they spend their time that maybe are not the most productive and end up kind of, I'd say, being a big time suck, right? So we call these the 7 deadly sins, a little biblical reference for anyone in here. The traditional ones are like gluttony, greed, things like that. But we kind of modified them to be about extracurricular planning. And so as you can probably see a theme through the 7 bullet points that are here, which are essentially a lot of the comparison culture, or trying to model your activities over someone else, or think that it needs to be the most impressive title, and it has to be a formal leadership role, or a lot of times people kind of thinking really small in terms of like it has to be just a formal activity that's offered in my own high school. There are national honor societies and baseball teams and drama clubs at most high schools around the US, if not the world, right? So oftentimes students who are standing out, especially in more competitive college admission landscape processes, are the ones who are thinking beyond the norm, beyond the list, the menu of things that are available. Another thing we see a lot with students and families, that I would say is a mistake, is thinking that programs that are expensive, that are these like paid research programs where you're paired with a mentor, or a program on a college campus, are like a door flinging, my chances just increased by exponentially in terms of college admissions. It's not really that case, right? We showed you the math before of the most considerably important parts of the admission process for a college. Extracurricular activities at most schools are moderately important. They At more selective schools, they can be more considerably important, but they're not, the person reading your application isn't analyzing and kind of only looking for like, did they do a program at a selective college already? Or, are they doing this intense research project? The way that you're spending your time is going to look different depending on your goals, your values, your skills. So really want to kind of take a moment to just de-emphasize. And if you are doing paid opportunities, you shouldn't be ashamed of that or think that that's a bad thing. But to think that you have to pay for experiences to stand out in college admissions is just misinformed. And oftentimes it's independent things that students are doing that cost either very little money or no money at all that still can be translating with the same level, I would argue, of college success. So Jay's going to talk a little bit more about this actually. Oh, you're muted, Jay. I think you were answering questions. Thank you for that.
Yeah, sorry, I was answering the Q&A questions. Yeah, so I've worked a lot with a lot of students for these what's called passion projects or self-directed projects, and there's a lot of benefits for students to do these. First, it shows the students authentic passion because oftentimes when we've helped students successfully execute these projects, they're in areas that they have passion in. A student is not going to want to dedicate, over 10 hours in doing something that they hate. So it shows, their values, it shows what they care about, and it shows what they enjoy doing. Oftentimes, these projects that students start off is a way to, again, show their leadership and initiative, but it's also a way to show problem-solving skills. Oftentimes, these projects are tackling a specific issue or problem in their communities. So again, it showcases all of these leadership and problem-solving qualities that colleges love to see in their applications. It also brings a unique angle to their application because these projects are self-directed and what the students want. Very rarely do you see two students with the exact same project. So unlike with sometimes activities like a music or sport or sports club that a lot of students will share, these self-directed passion projects are unique to the student and their interests and things that they care about. And then finally, accessibility could be a limitation for some families in terms of like, some of the programs, summer programs, research have a cost to it. Oftentimes, these self-directed projects essentially are free or low cost because the student gets to design it their own way. And there are also even some scholarships and grants out there that allow students the opportunities to do the passion projects. So again, for certain students, it could be more accessible than doing a paid summer program. We talked about, the importance of leadership and how it's not just a title in their application, because sometimes I'm working with a student and they'll say they're a president of a club, and then when you really ask them, like, what did you do as a president, they can't really explain, what they did, or they'll just say, like, I led the club without any further detail. And then there's also some students who maybe don't have a official title, but then they've shown that they've done a lot or made a big impact, and that again adds value to the application. So some of the qualities that aren't necessarily part of the title, but what I would consider leadership would be identifying problems, kind of like what we talked about with the self-directed projects. Students are able to make an observation in their school surroundings or communities and identify areas that can be improved or areas where there is an issue currently. Next, the student will gather maybe their friends or maybe other peers that have similar interests or similar passions in resolving said conflict or issue. And then next, they'll build a plan to take action to resolve that plan or issue. And then finally, students will track and measure, how they made a difference, and what kind of impacts they've made, and make adjustments as needed to continue resolving the conflict or project that they've identified. Next, we're
Yeah.
going to go over some examples of standout extracurricular activities that we found in our students. And Tom will talk a little bit more about how we came up with these.
Yeah, so these are all actually examples, some previous students that are either our college counseling team at College Essay Guy, which is a team of, there's about 6 to 7 of us who are actively taking on students one-on-one, as well as students who worked with our college essay and application support program. So, these are just, we wanted to give some examples of kind of what some of the things that Jay presented in the previous like self-directed project and initiatives could look like. So one, and actually it's funny, one of my counseling colleagues, she provided this example, but I actually read an application to Pomona whose theme of his application, I'd say like the way that he spent a lot of his time was in a very similar vein as this. He started a club, I remember it was called like We Come Together, something along those lines within his school. And it was based on observation of, a group of students. In this case, it was students who had autism, kind of segregating themselves from the general population within the school lunchroom. So this, one student that my colleague worked with saw that this was an area where there was not as much of a community spirit and a sense of inclusion for this particular population, and took a lot of action steps to try and make this to be something that was more of a norm within the school culture and community. So really in terms of leaving a lasting legacy and making an impact and aligning that with someone outside of your own self, this is a great way to do that. Another example here, it's very common. Lots of students, especially now, a lot of Gen Z are really passionate about the environment, are really concerned about climate change, how that's impacting our planet. So there are lots of students who are like, I'm involved in the Green Club. And then again, kind of like Jay said, you'll ask them what they do and they're like, oh, I go to meetings and like we have a recycling bin, right? We kind of, again, the admission nutrient of collaboration, right? We want to really encourage you to think about those points that Jay just shared about measuring impact and thinking about how you can amplify the work that you're doing maybe in your school wider, especially if you are applying to more selective colleges and universities that are looking for students who have that innate ability to sound like, are there what we call bell cow students? They're ones who are able to kind of like raise up, and they're the ones like leading and kind of really galvanizing other people around something that they're doing and helping provide either a toolkit or a framework or a path to have that be amplified and radiated out of kind of what they're currently doing. So this student here, joining a club in ninth grade, kind of this is following exactly a little bit of like the steps that we kind of mentioned in terms of 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, how ideally your activities evolve. Noticing a gap, taking action to implement and do something about that by reaching out to administrators, getting that funding, looking into grants really essentially, and then being able to have that be expanded to the wider school district as that kind of leaving of the legacy component, right? Students who are involved in the arts, you might be like, it's my art. Just play it on a stage. That's not really, I mean, it's benefiting people in the moment, right? There are still ways to leverage your art talent and that passion of yours, and find other people and collaborate with other people who share the similar joy of that art, right? So one student that we worked with in particular was really interested in, started off kind of early on playing her violin at senior centers, but then identified through conversations, and interactions with the residents that many of them were former musicians themselves, and started to actually kind of have opportunities for, with instruments being donated, being able to secure that, was able to kind of get more nursing homes, assisted living facilities, and centers to kind of bring music back in a way that's beyond the typical student performing, residents watching and kind of being solely observers as opposed to active participants in the creation of that joy, right? So that's another example. Mental health awareness. Jay mentioned he's working with a student right now who's student body president, who's thinking about how to kind of amplify and normalize mental health challenges, which many students of today's age are experiencing more than previous generation. There's lots of data around this. I'm sure I'm speaking to something that many, parents and counselors on the call are present to. But again, it's about, presenting and, sharing a topic that you have an interest or an expertise in through a format like a TEDx, or talk that you plan at your school or your community. Then it's about, again, thinking about how can I have a ripple effect of some of these things that I'm communicating in this TED Talk and get more people to get it in their hands. We even do the same thing at College Guy, right? We're all about empowering school counselors, independent counselors, to share the knowledge that we're presenting on these webinars and take it and implement it in their own classrooms, in their own college counseling offices. So it's the same kind of theme with a lot of these standout students who are amplifying their efforts more widely. And then this last example here, before I'm going to turn the mic over to Jay, is about food insecurity. Again, noticing an issue in your community. In this case, it was seeing lots of unused food that students were throwing away in the dining hall or the cafeteria, and knowing that there's also a lot of food insecurity in their city more widely. So having that kind of start in the school and finding ways to reuse food that is untainted, untouched, still usable, recyclable, essentially, and seeing the success and measuring the success that it was within the own school, having numbers to kind of back it up as a great idea for other schools to take on, and then presenting that to administrators, partners, teachers, counselors, collaborators to keep that ripple effect going further and further and further.
All right, thanks, Tom. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about computer science, engineering, and tech interests that some students are having with the popularity of computer science and engineering as a major. We have a lot of students coming in wanting to know how can they make their applications more competitive for making it into these programs, specifically competitive joint programs like Penn's MET program or Berkeley's MET program. That's a combo of business plus computer science or engineering. So what we did was we looked at our previous students who made it into these programs, these highly selective programs, and identified areas that were common between all of them. So some of the ones that may be a little bit more obvious are just the relevant coursework, so taking the highest level math classes up to calculus and beyond, highest level of physics class offered at the school, and potentially computer science. And then some of the more common STEM extracurricular activities could be things like robotics, girls who code, math and science competitions. So these are common amongst the students who are admitted. But what we've noticed that students that really stood out were students who had an interdisciplinary approach to STEM and tackling or coming up with a project that went beyond just the normal like CS or engineering field, but they applied their knowledge in a different setting. So we have a couple examples showcasing some of the projects that some of these students have worked with before. So we had a student that self-designed wind turbines. So this particular student grew up in a rural area with a lot of farms. So the student wanted to develop sustainable way to support agriculture. So using his knowledge in math, physics, and also the Bernoulli's principle applications, design a wind turbine on his own. Next is a student who was interested in public health and the effects of COVID-19 vaccines. So the student collected data from the Turkish COVID patient and analyzed factors leading them to refrain from being vaccinated. So these students, this particular student was interested in the public health aspect, like why certain people were taking the COVID vaccine and some people were not. Through a co-lead of 13 volunteers contacting over 250 patients, showing, again, collaboration and initiative. The student was able to find results and reported the results to the Turkish Ministry of Health, which was accepted and added to their statistics. Another student who was interested, again, in CSAI, used that skill for museum modernization. So making 3D maps of museums, digitizing certain artifacts into a web database or online database so that students from all over the globe can access it and have greater reach to the artifact or the item that they're displaying. And then next will be a mosquito-borne disease control, where students, again, use a combination of drones plus AI imaging to identify areas of water that could potentially be breeding grounds for mosquitoes, because they volunteered at the IAPH and learned about that. So that was an issue that they were passionate about and cared about. So using their interest and knowledge in drones and AI technology, built a project out of that. So yeah, another cool adaptation of computer science plus tech. And then finally, a student learned JavaScript, CSS, HTML, through Girls Who Code, and then was also part of a organization called Adoption Share, where it's an agency that matches children to prospective families. So working with this agency, they were able to apply the knowledge that they learned from Girls Who Code to help develop a family match mobile application that again utilizes the passion to help tackle a issue or something that didn't exist yet, and it really benefited a lot of families. Yeah, so these are some interesting projects that some of our students have worked with in the past. As a counselor, I work with CG students on creating some of these projects and identifying their interest to help develop these projects. So there's no like formula or guidebook that fits every single scenario, every single project. So they are a little bit daunting, a little bit scary because there's no roadmap. But when we do it correctly, or when we help motivate students in the right way, some of these projects can be really unique and impactful. So yeah, there's a lot of value in them.
And I just want to voice that these past two slides here, these kind of computer science, engineering, tech examples, yet they definitely showcase, right, this interdisciplinary combination, and it's consistent with admission rates at various colleges and universities. So the students, like, for example, University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, it's a very popular school for students who are interested in computer science in particular. And if you look at their acceptance rate for computer science, it's the most recent data shows that it's around 7%. But they also have this program called Computer Science Plus X. And that means computer science plus another academic discipline. And it actually shows you on their website the admission rates for computer science on its own. And computer science plus X is much higher. And it even shows you different separate rates for students who combine computer science with agriculture, right? So how can my talent for technology and STEM and the skill set that I have benefit this other industry, this other profession, this other area? So that question is something that we're seeing both in terms of tangible admission rates at schools that publish them, as well as anecdotal experiences from our previous students at various colleges and universities. It's really important. These quotes that you see underneath each of these are actual components from the student's application. These are in their own words. These are the ways that they describe these projects to the admission team through activities list descriptions, through their additional information section, through application specific essays, recommendation letter notes, right? So that's just something that I also wanted to voice, like things like, for example, the mosquito drone student. It was also mentioned in the students, it was a part of the students' IB, International Baccalaureate Extended Essay. So it's the idea of like, this is a problem that I learned about from my own research from my academics through school. And I tried to find ways to actually do something about it with my own skills, talents, values, right? So we're 2 minutes over. I just want to be mindful of time. So Rebecca, if you want to go ahead and pause the recording, that would be great so we can upload that to YouTube for future people.